Hey everyone, thanks for joining. It's Corey of Blue Falcon Board Gaming. If you're new to the channel, I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran that started the Blue Falcon Board Gaming Group in the Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia tri-state area with the hopes of promoting positive mental health through board gaming, as well as to make board games more accessible to the community by hosting and co-hosting free events, doing giveaways, all of that kind of stuff. Today I've got Ben with me here from AEffect Gaming. Ben, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it. So,
Yeah,
do
of
you want to
course.
tell us who's Ben outside of board games?
Yeah, I mean, outside of board games, I work as a youth director at a local Presbyterian church. So I get to hang out with teenagers, and that's like my full-time job. I live in the western suburbs of Chicago. Hobby-wise, I obviously love board games. I'm also super into coffee. I roast my own coffee. I do all kinds of fancy stuff with coffee. And I love to do a lot of hiking, except for the hiking in Illinois is not amazing. So, but I lived in Oregon for a while and got to do a lot of amazing, amazing hikes while I was there.
Gotcha. So, what got you into board gaming?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always enjoyed games. And board games were always something that just exists in people's houses, right? Like Risk or Monopoly, uh, things like Clue. Those staple games were always a part of my household. But the kind of into the modern world of board gaming happened when my cousins actually started getting into board gaming, and they'd ask for newer games at the time, or newer at least in our thinking of them. So games like Betrayal at House on the Hill was one of the big ones that they wanted. Gloom was another big one that they wanted, and they'd ask for those for Christmas, and then we'd end up just playing these games like Citadels all throughout Christmas. And that was kind of really my big entry into realizing, wait, there's more than just Monopoly or Clue or Risk. And then when I found some friends and they invited me to do some of the heavier cardboard games like War of the Ring or Axis and Allies, that's when I think it really was like, all right, I guess I'm into board games now.
So, what do you think has kept you in the hobby? What's special about board gaming to you? You've obviously invested a lot of time into it, a lot of money into it. So, what's kept you so long into the hobby?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a combination of I'm just generally a restless person. So being able to do activities is always good for me. And I don't want to be stuck staring at a screen all the time. So board games are a good way to do an activity without a screen. But also, board games are such a great way to build community. And I have a little shoulder bag that I always have one or two different games with me. So if I'm meeting someone for coffee, if I'm meeting a teenager for lunch or whatever, and we're talking and we're hanging out, but there might be a little bit more interaction that needs to be done, I'll pull out a light game and we'll get to play that. And I love the way that that allows us to share an experience on a very low stakes, but start getting closer with people and start being more comfortable with each other. So I think it's a combination of my love of puzzles or my love of the strategy of games, my love of the adventure of games, the love of the art of games, and then that community aspect of the two. Those are the big ones.
Yeah, one of the things for me, you said you're just kind of restless in general. That's me. Like,
Yeah.
um, I was real bad about like hobby jumping, and I would go like just with my ADHD, man, I would just go full into a hobby, research it, just all the books, all the videos, learn everything about it, get all
Yeah.
this stuff for it, and then may not even like end up doing it.
Yep.
So the great thing for board games for me is like there's so many different sub hobbies within the hobby.
Yeah.
And then there's a ton of mechanisms and everything else. So like I could be on a big deck builder kick for a while and then just jump over to a worker placement kick for a while, but
Mhm.
I'm still within that same hobby. Or I can get into, hey, how can I upgrade these components and be crafty with it or whatever and do some component upgrades, but I'm still within that same hobby. So it's like I'm not jumping to a completely new thing.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And each game is almost like its own microcosm of a hobby, right? And so you might be really into this one game and then get tired of it, and then your ADHD brain is like, okay, new game, and it keeps your attention. So I love how games give you so many different possible experiences at the table, while still being all a part of one big hobby.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely helped out kind of calm the mind for me.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of mechanisms on TikTok, you do a lot of, learn the mechanisms type videos. What kind of drew you to do that type of video? You see a lot of people doing review videos of games or unboxing of games, but you're getting kind of into the nitty gritty of it of, hey, this is how this mechanism works.
Yeah, I think the reason that that's something that drew me was is twofold. One, the programming that I have done and am doing with high school students is centered around them being able to kind of invent their own game. And we throw words out like deck builder and worker placement, and I don't want to throw those out and not have an explanation for each of these high school students of like what the heck am I talking about. So that's one big reason why I started there. The other big reason is more of just a personality thing. I People as they get to know me start to find out that I'm a DIY just to my core person. I will show up to a flea market or show up to a store and just think, can I make that? Can I make that? Can I do that? How did someone make that? And so it's my natural curiosity always to be asking what are the basic building blocks of whatever it is that I'm interested in? What is going together to make what I'm looking at? And so for board games, it's like, okay, there's a lot happening and I'm really enjoying this experience, but what about this experience am I enjoying? Why am I enjoying it? And how is it interacting with the theme? That's really something that draws me in my personality of like wanting to understand the basic building blocks that go into a game with even, 15 or more mechanics, but what are those basic options? So, yeah, it's a really great way for me to learn about board games.
Yeah, and there's a great book. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
Oh, look at you. I have
Yeah.
not seen that one.
So it is fantastic. So it is Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, an Encyclopedia of Mechanisms. And it's
Wow.
literally just all different types of mechanisms.
Okay.
Um, they go through and they will give you specific mechanisms, all of the variations of those mechanisms, and then like examples of games that use those mechanisms. And it gives you like, hey, if you're using this type of mechanism, this is the good things that can happen with it, but here's some of the issues that people run into it with it. So
Interesting.
it's a great book to pick up.
Yeah.
It's like $80 though because it is more of a like
It's like a
college
textbook.
textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Jeffrey Inglestein and Isaac Shalov.
Okay.
It's through CRC Press, but it's a fantastic book. The only thing that I have found about this book that I do not like is the cover, and the king and the queen are set up improperly on the cover.
Oh no, that's so funny.
So I'm assuming that's not the authors. Um, that's not the
Probably.
authors doing. That was somebody, using a prop photo or something, or setting up a
Yeah.
photo just for the cover of the book. But I'm like, that little bit right there, man, that just drives me crazy every time I look at it. I'm like, the king and queen are opposite of each other on the
Oh
board. It
no,
is set up incorrectly. You cannot have a game of chess set up incorrectly talking about mechanisms.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's horrible.
But
But that cool book. Thanks for the recommendation. I'll have to look it up.
yeah, and if you can't tell the ADHD, everything's tabbed out.
Wow. Yeah. I was wondering if that came with it or if that was you.
No, that's all me. Another
Wow.
good one is characteristic of games,
Okay.
and this one is George Ellis. I hope I'm saying it right. Richard Garfield and K. Robert Gushera, and they get more into like what constitutes a game, like,
Mm,
and I mean it gets into like kind of like the social, like anthropology type stuff of games of like, hey, these are different things that kind of like old cultures and stuff used to do, and this is kind of where the gamification began, and it gives you like
yeah.
definitions of let's see here, you got basics, multiplayer games, what's a infrastructure of a game versus a system.
Huh.
It talks about player effort, the superstructure of the game. There's a game theory and just all kinds of different things. So those two books are really great, looking at game design and stuff like that, and just learning more about it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, speaking of game design, you are working on your own game, Compost Champions. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. There's a couple different games that have started to come out of the gatherings I do with my students, and some of them are games that were my idea, and then I play test with them and they give feedback and they are integrally a part of it. One of those is Compost Champion, which is currently getting a redesign from my prototypes by Hannah, who's the same person doing your game, I believe. And so it's just basically a set collection game with a little almost like pick up sticks mechanic where you have a little pitchfork that you're working to grab little tiles off of the table without touching other tiles and collecting different sets of compostable materials. But really trying to bring into that games for good aspect where I worked to include different compostable materials that people might not realize are compostable. So things like hair or cork, those would be good examples of stuff we don't realize we don't have to throw in the trash. And if we have access to a place to compost, we could be eliminating our waste in that way. So it's just a cute little game that you can play with your kids or adults. And I've been surprised at how much people have enjoyed that. The other game that I've done is almost more of a tool than a game, and that's one I call AEffect the game. I'm doing a reprint of this because I redesigned some of it, but basically is just like an exercise, a creative exercise where you draw randomly a mechanic and then a meaning and then some form of curveball, and you're kind of challenging each other and the people around you to pitch a game using those three prompts in creative and exciting ways.
Okay. So, hey, let's try it out. So, won't you give me like a scenario and then see if by the end of the interview, if I can come up with something? I probably can't, but we'll see.
Yeah, here we go. So, your mechanic, let me draw randomly, is going to be hand management. So, you got to make a hand management game with, let me get the meaning deck. Here we go. Shuffle it up. Your meaning is going to be healthcare. So hand management, healthcare game. And then your curveball, this is where it gets really fun. It's going to be steampunk. And while you're thinking, I'll just share that this is kind of set up in the format that I really encourage my students to do anytime they're coming up with a game is don't try to have a game with multiple layers of mechanics. Don't try to have a game with a really intense meaning or anything like that, but pick one mechanic, pick one meaning that matters to you, and then make it fun. And this tries to replicate that with a curveball and a meaning and a mechanic. Would you like to try and pitch me your game sooner or later?
Let's do it toward the end of the interview. And what
So
would be so for hand management? For anybody that may not know, what would you if we were students right now, what would you say? Hey, this is what hand management is.
it's a great question. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. If I'm remembering right, and you can help me get there because I'm not remembering everything all the time. It's basically just the fact that you might have to discard different cards or keep certain cards. So something like where maybe you draw a card and have to keep only four cards. So choosing which card do you get rid of, which card do you keep. Usually some form of set collection or trick taking is also a part of that, but the hand management being making sure that what's in your hand is the best thing that you can have in your hand with cards like this. Is that a
Gotcha.
pretty good?
Yeah, yeah. I would think that pretty much gives a like a basic covering and stuff of it.
Yeah. I'm definitely not the
So
expert in mechanics. I just like to talk about them.
yeah. So how's the program and everything received by the kids that you work with?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question and it's a complicated answer right now because it's a program that I'm confident a lot of teens have enjoyed and really are glad that it exists. However, I'm running into some particular idiosyncrasies here in the context that I'm in, where I've shared in a couple of different spaces that in the western suburbs of Chicago, it's a solidly middle class, upper middle class area. And it's a really well funded school system. And the school and the parents are asking a lot from every student. And so these kids are pushed into taking multiple AP classes. They're being encouraged to be a part of multiple school after school clubs or sports or band with a lot of this overhanging like college application stuff where they're like, I have to have a good college application. I have to get a good college education because my parents worked hard and they've got double income and they have a certain style of living that they want me to have or to have better. And there's a lot of pressure that every student I interact with seems to feel. And so as a result, any programming can be really hard to get any students involved in. And it's a weird situation that I've not encountered anywhere else where if you have a good program, usually people just like show up. But in this case, even if you have a good program, these high schoolers just need time to rest. They need time to be themselves. And they live in a community that I think is always asking them, what can you do for me? Do more for me, do more for me, produce more for me, be more exceptional. And my goal is always just to make a space that says, hey, you're here, be comfortable, you're valuable, not because of what you do for me, you're valuable, but just because of who you are. And so we've actually had to pause this semester because our attendance wasn't where it needed to be. We'll hopefully be able to restart in the spring, but yeah, we're not doing gatherings right now because of those demands. I think that's the main reason is because of those demands. But still have those connections with students, still doing all the social medias and education through that. So that's what's going on there.
Gotcha. So with you designing your own game and everything right now, say if you could, magically get whatever IP you wanted, you didn't have to worry about buying the rights to it or anything. What game or what IP would you design a game around, and like how do you think it would flow?
That's a great question. My immediate answer is I think it would be really cool. It's a couple different options. Either I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, so obviously that sort of IP would be the golden, like, there's no way I would ever get that IP. So it'd be cool to design a game around that, but there's all kinds of games in that sphere already. And I'd almost rather the opportunity to make a game around some of the books or the worlds of an author called N.K. Jemisin. I don't know if you've read any of her work, but she writes some amazing fantasy. And it's been a while since I've reread her series. But if there were a way for me to find mechanics that I could put her IP on, that would be something that I'd really enjoy. I don't have a full fleshed out pitch for you, but anything by N.K. Jemisin is a world that just sucks me in and that I am obsessed with. So being able to offer an opportunity for people to engage with that through a game would be something that would be just awesome.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it would be Supernatural. There's a few Supernatural games out there, but like Supernatural Monopoly's not cutting it.
No,
Um,
definitely not.
like I've watched the series 3 times. I've got the Reaper trap that they use whenever Bobby goes unconscious. I've got that Reaper trap instead of the main one on
Wow.
my left arm or my left hand of my left arm.
Yeah.
And then I've got the purgatory symbol on the right hand.
Okay.
So
That's
I
all.
kind of enjoy the show. Um,
Clearly, it's
yeah.
one of your favorites.
Yeah, I mean, like I always joke, like my whole left arm is like my don't eat myself arm. I've had with mental health issues and stuff, struggling with, those type of thoughts and everything. So like the Reaper trap on the hand, it made
Yep.
sense to me. I've got I can't see because of how the camera is. There we go. So you can't really see, but I got your six. That's a, military thing.
Okay.
I've got a quote that says, amidst the mist and coldest frost, he thrust his fist against the post and still insists he sees the ghost.
Wow.
So a lot of people will think that like that's from the movie It and the book It, but Stephen King actually took that from a book called Donovan's Brain, and it was like a 1950s, 1960s book maybe. That was a sci-fi book about like they're got a mad scientist type that's living out in the desert by himself and doing these experiments, and this plane crashes, and it's like a single pilot plane type thing, and he's able to get the pilot's body and everything, but he's not able to save the guy, but he is able to save his brain, and he encases the brain in like a jar, and he's able to like communicate with the brain, and he's like doing these experiments. Well, it gets to where the brain is starting to tell him stuff to do, and like he's doing stuff that he doesn't want to do because of the brain. And I'm like, oh, this is a great quote. Like, like stop listening to the thoughts. Like,
Yeah.
so this whole arm is just different things of like that. I've got the you do not recognize the bodies in the water. That was a SCP thing. It's kind of like SCPs, kind of like creepy pastas,
Okay.
almost like these made up horror stories. And the whole thing with it is there's a body of water in an undisclosed location, and anybody that gets close to it, they think that they see somebody that they know drowning in that water, and they try to jump in to save them, and they end up killing themselves in the
Wow.
process. So anybody that works for the SCP Foundation always has to repeat the phrase, "You do not recognize the bodies in the water," to remind themselves, "Hey, this is like what this thing does."
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my reminder of like, "Hey, you can't save everyone. You
Yeah.
have to put yourself first sometimes," stuff like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think I may have the game. So hand
Okay.
management, healthcare, steampunk.
Yep. What you got?
So we're gonna do some sort of card drafting system where you're passing cards around to try to build your hand,
Hmm.
and you're gonna have like sick patients that are in that hand, or maybe just also like normal population that's not sick. But like the whole healthcare hospital system is now some sort of steampunk thing. So you have to have some sort of scrap material to make certain things work in that hospital. Right. So you're trying to take that, you're trying to not take sick patients, but you also have to take sick patients to be able to place them out of your hand with a steampunk object to make that healthcare system work. Like the more you can do that, the more points you get. But you don't want to get stuck with patients in your hand.
Patience. Yeah.
Yeah. So something
Like it.
along those lines, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is just a cool little tool to get our brain juices flowing. And I've found as I do this, you every once in a while run into a nugget of an idea, even if it's not the entire idea, that you're like, wait, that's a good game. We need to flesh that out. And I think it's a great tool.
So on your TikTok channel, you also do a lot of like print and play stuff. So do you want to talk about the benefits of print and play? Because we've talked about it before. The hobby can be an expensive entry if you're brand new to it, or depending on how cult of the new you want to be.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the opportunity to be able to drop $60 on a board game.
Yeah.
So print and play is a good alternative to that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think print and play is a hobby that I definitely want more people to know about because, and I love it personally for a number of reasons. One is cheaper games. You can find, generally it's card based games, but there are board games that you can get, and you can get them for free. And all it costs is what it costs for you to buy the materials to make it, which is varied depending on how intense you want to get and the time that it takes you to make it. And then even if you're paying for the files, you're not paying more than $5 per game, right? Like Button Shy has collections of 18 card games that are so fun and so well thought out, and they just cost $3 on PNP Arcade. And not only is it a cheaper way to get a game, but it's also an extra hobby on top of that. So if anybody's into crafting or likes to do things with their hands, then you get your print and play game and you get hours of hobby entertainment of making the game. And then at the end, you have a game to play and to share with your friends. So I think it's awesome because it's not just like a cheaper way to get into board gaming, it's cheaper and it's another extra hobby where there's Facebook groups, I think I'm only the only one really on TikTok talking about it, but I'm sure there's stuff on Instagram as well. I just haven't found it, but it's a really cool community of people who are kind of helping each other use the best materials, use the best techniques, but it's very niche. And so it's really pretty tight area. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I like the I don't know the guy's name, and I don't think it was specifically for board games, although he did have like some board game like tokens.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so funny. It was almost like one of the ASMR videos, and he was talking about how to make tokens out of the cabochons, which are like the little metal base, and then it's got like the glass bead over it. But just his one video, like he would get super close to the mic and just be like, "Cabochon." Like every time he said it,
That's
it was just
amazing.
great. And I was just like, man, I wanted to learn how to do this because it looks like one of the necklace pendants almost type
Oh
things, but
yeah.
you can get them without the little circle, so it's
Oh.
perfectly round, and you've got like this nice little elegant looking glass pendant bead that's got your character in it and stuff, and you can use that as a token instead of miniatures or cardboard stand-ups or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's such a cool opportunity for us to be more intentional about the games that we get, right? Like, I think a lot of people get stuck into the trap with board games of this just consuming, I need more, I need more, I need more, I need the new, I need the new, I need the new. And print and play forces us to be a bit slower to say, oh, this game is interesting. Do I want to put the effort into it? And if you do, then you put the effort into it, but that might take you a couple days or a week or whatever your timing is. And so you're not just consuming over and over and over again. You're doing it a lot slower, theoretically, a little bit more sustainably. I don't know that for sure. I don't have the numbers to prove that, but it's a cool way of not necessarily getting caught in the trap of whatever the shiny new thing is. Not that there's anything wrong with enjoying that. It's just, I think it sometimes can take over our hobby or take over our lives a little bit.
And like you said too, with the having to actually make it, especially if you're doing it with a spouse or even a friend or like your kids or whatever, like you've got that time together. Like that's another community aspect of it. But then I also feel like you're going to appreciate that more than just if you go out and buy a game. It's like, hey, this is something that we've both put time into. We may even have the paper cuts to prove it. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And that's been some of the best times of conversation that I've had with the students I work with is we've had days where we just sat down and all we were doing is, trimming cards, cutting cards, doing the corner rounder. And while we're doing that, while our hands are occupied, while our eyes are occupied, we're not having to look at each other face to face. That's when we got to dive into deep conversations around them sharing their take on various political things that were going on, them sharing their take. They found out I worked at a church and they were like, here's my thought and why I'm not okay with Christianity. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And we were able to just have these awesome conversations that, you know, ideally we'd be able to have with anybody at any time, but because of various social pressures or being nervous or being scared, sometimes just crafting together really opens up that space for a conversation. And I've definitely seen that to be true.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've said it a ton on this channel. People that constantly follow may be tired of it, but like that's how I got into board games. Was I worked at a homeless shelter. It was a
Yeah.
drop-in day shelter, and there was a group of guys that never wanted to talk to anybody. And I was like, okay, what's my in with these guys? And they were playing Magic the Gathering one day, and I was just like, hey, what's this? Teach me. And they're like, absolutely. And then like all kinds of stuff started coming out, and it's like, okay, hey, let me get you connected with this resource. Let me get you over here, and get them out of that situation. And it all came through. It all came through Magic, man. It was
Wow.
great. And then
Yeah, that's awesome.
through Magic, me going into the card shop, start seeing board games, watching, Tolarian Community College for deck building and stuff, and like the dice tower starts popping up. And I'm like, oh,
Nice.
what's this? So, all right, so we've got Family Feud. We got to
Okay.
see if you can beat Matthew from Envy Born Games,
I can
the
almost
TikTok
guarantee I
board
will
game
not.
daddy. Well, he's at 249, I believe, was his score. So we'll see if we can beat 249.
49. Okay.
It is fast money, but I'm not going to throw a timer up. So we'll just act like we've got like a 20-second timer going on here.
Okay.
All right. So, other than Santa, tell me someone who knows if a kid has been naughty or nice.
I'm going to go with mom.
Okay. Name something you would have to get used to if you were reincarnated as a cow.
Being milked.
Tell me a kind of ball that is smaller than a baseball.
Golf ball.
Okay. Name a place where you are embarrassed to admit, or name a place where people are embarrassed to admit they haven't been in a long time.
Church.
And then fill in the blank. Snow blank.
Snow as in falling.
Yep.
Okay. Ball.
All right. See what we got here. So, other than Santa, tell me someone who knows if their kid has been naughty or nice. You said mom, so parents was number one answer, and it's
Yes.
65 points. Off to a good
I'm
start.
amazing.
Name something you'd have to get used to if you were reincarnated as a cow. You said getting milked. That's number two answer, but it's tied for number one. So 39 points.
All right.
So chewing grass and getting milked were both tied at 39 points.
Interesting.
Tell me a kind of ball that is smaller than a baseball. You had said golf ball, and that was number one at 70 points.
Yes.
You are getting dangerously close right now. You're at
Oh,
174
I'm
so far.
coming for you, Maddie.
Name a place where people are embarrassed to admit they haven't been in a long time. You said church. That's number one at 55 points.
Oh, I was not confident about that one.
Yeah, yeah. And then the last one, fill in the blank, snow blank. You had said balls, and that is not on there.
What?
Snow White was number one at 67.
Oh, okay,
And you
I
had
get it.
Snowflake, Snowman, and Snowstorm.
Everybody's no fun. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you were only at 229. So the board game daddy of TikTok is still
Oh,
the reigning champion.
I'm second in this, and I'm second in thirst traps. I'm used to it by now.
All right. So where can people find you at? What social medias are you on? What sites do you want to plug?
Yeah, I mean the biggest one is find me on TikTok. Oh, TikTok, AEffect_TT. I'm there doing all kinds of fun stuff every day. I'm also on Instagram, starting to post more often there at AEffect_TTG. You can download a couple of different print and play files that I and my students have developed. If you search AEffect on Etsy, you will find some digital downloads. They're only $5. And eventually we'll get some physically printed games on there as well. So those would be my three big plugs. So AEffect the game, which we just played, you can download a print and play file of that right now for just $5 on Etsy.
Very nice. I'm definitely going to go do that. I want to kind of work that brain juice a little bit more.
Yeah, do it. Do your own print and play.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ben, I appreciate the time, man. It was a blast talking to you, and I'm
It was
looking forward to
great.
seeing
Yeah,
what other
thanks for having
TikToks you
me.
put out, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for being a part of this community.
Absolutely. You too.